Hello, good morning. This is Shamim Naqvi. Uh, I am here on Privacy Day to talk about technology and health-related matters, and my guest today is Vasant. Welcome, Vasant.
Hey, Shivim. Nice meeting you today.
Let me start by asking you, what is a specialty pharmacy?
A specialty pharmacy in layman's terms is a pharmacy that actually caters to patients for high cost and high cost drugs and rare diseases. So some of the examples would be multiple sclerosis, hemophilia, hepatitis C, rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. So usually, since these drugs are expensive, and also these conditions affect only a small percentage of the population, you wouldn't really find these drugs on the shelves of a retail pharmacy. So specialty pharmacies are in that way mail order pharmacies that actually ship the prescriptions to you. And given the nature of conditions they treat, it requires close monitoring with the patients, and they provide high touch counseling and therapy for the patients.
I see. And collecting large amounts of very specific patient-specific information as they go through these operations.
Correct, correct. And they keep a constant tab on how the patient is doing overall, right? I mean, if the patient has any or experiencing any adverse effects out of the medications they're taking, whether they're adherent to the medications, or if there are any factors that are affecting their schedule of medications and so on. And they keep constantly in touch with the patient to make sure the overall health outcomes are favorable.
So if they are in the process of aggregating all this information, essentially they are building up a history uh, on the patients, or what is referred to as longitudinal patient records.
That's correct. That's correct. So one of the key pieces of information these pharmacies collect is during the clinical assessments, or what they call as like indication therapy management sessions, where they collect specific details about this patient, which could include lab results of the patients, and validate to see if there is any improvement. And they also work very closely with the physician organizations and continuously monitor the health of the patient. And over a period of time, this builds up the longitudinal data for the patients, because most of them, if chronic conditions, then they leave a trail.
I see. Now, given the valuable data, what sort of entities are interested? I believe that the payers are interested in this kind of data. What
Correct.
is a payer?
A payer is a health insurance company that actually processes the claims and pays the benefits on behalf of the patient. So those entities are called payer. They simply put in layman's terms, health insurance companies like United Health Group, Cigna, Aetna, and so on.
And
And
and why are they interested in these longitudinal patient record data?
so their interest stems from the fact, like, okay, they would have certain performance thresholds for pharmacies participating in their networks. And some of the information they collect include like whether the pharmacies are ensuring certain performance thresholds, such as dispensing accuracy, on-time delivery, right? And also certain clinical management programs that are really required. And they look at it from that standpoint. And the other entities that are interested are the manufacturers of drugs that they require that information in order to uh, do R&D or aid with their R&D
Hmm.
for improving the efficacy of the drugs.
So we now have three entities that you have told us about. We have the specialty pharmacy, we have the payers, and we have the manufacturers. And the situation is that the specialty pharmacy has this extremely detailed and valuable data that could be of value to the payer and or the manufacturer as well.
Absolutely.
Now, so clearly, the payer and the manufacturer may want to get access to this data, but there are constraints, I believe, in the sharing of this data. What are some of the constraints that control the sharing of this patient-specific information?
That's correct. So HIPAA law ensures patient information is protected and is used only for legitimate reasons that include healthcare treatment and operations purposes. So which include coordinating or providing information to another physician or another health system or a pharmacy in order to coordinate treatment or care for the patient, or for healthcare operation purposes such as like filing a claim, getting a reimbursement, submitting a prior authorization, scheduling a call with the patient, and so on. So if there is no legitimate need to share the data, then it shouldn't be shared. That's what HIPAA says. And even if you have a legitimate need to share uh, patient's information, patient's health information with another entity, then you must do so only at the minimum necessary data. So HIPAA actually protects the privacy and security of what we call as PHI, or in other words, the protected health information, which is the health information that ties uniquely to an individual.
So if a payer wants to access data from the specialty pharmacy, who determines that the reason the payer wants access to the data is legitimate? What does it mean to say, I have a legitimate reason? Who makes that determination?
That's usually worked out during the contracting stage. A payer would actually request a participating pharmacy to report on certain information to be part of their network, which includes, as I said, uh, measuring performance of the pharmacy in the network, because they will want to maintain their network of pharmacies hold to certain performance thresholds. And usually these details are worked out during the contracting stage, and a legitimate business need is determined at that point in time.
So it's a contractual determination that sort of says, okay, fine.
Yeah.
If you process this in certain ways consistent with this contract, then your purpose is a legitimate purpose.
Correct.
And
Because players have a legitimate need in terms of healthcare operation purposes to know that information. And in most cases, like the report may not have certain PHI. It could be an aggregated report, but like if it does involve PHI, then it should have a legitimate need before the information could be shared.
so if the pharmacy wants to share data
Mhm.
and determines that there is a legal contract establishing the legitimacy, it can transfer or share data containing PHI information with the payer.
Correct.
There is no restriction in de-identifying the data set and removing the PHI information because the purpose is legitimate.
Correct. And it is illegitimate if it falls under the HIPAA provisions that allow data sharing, like as in this case would be healthcare operations purposes, then yes, the pharmacy can safely share PHI for the provider. And they often do, right? So whenever they are submitting a prior authorization, in order to provide justification for dispensing that particular drug for the patient, they share PHI with the payers. When they're filing a claim, for the patient, then they share PHI with the payers, so on.
Okay. So just to reestablish, there is no problem in the pharmacy sharing PHI specific data with a payer as long as it is for a legitimate reason, and the legitimacy is determined by some contractual by the which which sort of establishes that the purpose of the sharing is legitimate.
Correct. And it's governed by HIPAA. It's laid out by the HIPAA law what is legitimate.
Now, if the purpose is not legitimate, is there a way to share this data still and not be in violation of HIPAA regulations? So, for example, the manufacturer comes along and wants certain types of information from the pharmacy, but there is no legitimate contract that defines that there is no contract that defines the legitimacy of the manufacturer's reason for that data. What happens in that case?
In that case, the only information that a covered entity, or in this case, the specialty pharmacy, could share is only de-identified information. Even if they're encrypting PHI, they wouldn't be able to share because the manufacturer doesn't have a need to know in terms of getting all health information that actually ties back to an individual.
Okay. And what is the process of de-identification do?
There are a couple of methods. One is called an expert determination method, where you have an expert individually review the data elements being dispensed and use statistical models to ensure the overall data that's being shared is safe to share and doesn't have PHI. And the other is actually the safe harbor method, where someone from an IT department within the covered entity or a business associate would actually review the health information being shared. And there are 18 identifiers laid out by the HIPAA security rule, which includes the patient name, date of birth, any part of the date, address, phone number, social security number, and so on. Like making sure all of these individually identifiable information is stripped out of the health information. So PHI is basically individually identifiable information plus the health information tied together, right? So when you remove or strip off the individually identifiable information, then it's no longer PHI. It's just de-identified health information. At that point, it becomes safe to share with a manufacturer.
So once you have anonymized or de-identified the data, the pharmacy in this case can now, based on the regulations, can now share the de-identified data set with the manufacturer, and the manufacturer is now free to process it in any way that they deem fit.
Correct.
Okay. And the de-identification process removes the PHI information. Now, I have read some research reports that say that it is still possible in certain cases by combining a de-identified data set with other pieces of information, with other data sets, it may be possible to re-identify the patient. Has that been somehow taken care of in the world of technology?
Correct. And I can cite one example that actually happened in the past where a health entity shared health information along with insurance ID of the patient. And insurance ID is actually considered individual identifiable information, which could be used to reassociate or re-identify the patient. So that's a clear violation, right? So you need to have or exercise extreme caution in terms of determining which information could be used to identify an individual. And even an extreme example in this case, which is also called out by the HIPAA security rule, is that even if you strip out the address information, if you're just including a zip code, but if that zip code has less than 20,000 population, then that's still considered PHI. So one needs to exercise extreme caution before any health information shared and ensure it has nothing in it to be able to re-identify a patient.
Well, we at Safely Share are working on a technology called secure enclave technology. This secure enclave is a hardware-controlled region of memory in a machine. And these are modern machines which are now generally available on public clouds, such as Microsoft Azure and Google and AWS. And these secure enclaves allow computations to happen that are completely isolated and protected. So there is no leak of information. And one very interesting use case is to allow applications to process data sets that have PHI information in them, and to assure that the processing is always isolated and free of any data leaks. What would be interesting is to see if that falls under and what sort of impact does it have in terms of the HIPAA regulation? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, definitely. So HIPAA requires a covered entity or a business associate that actually manages PHI on behalf of a covered entity to protect health information of the patient, and it has various safeguards as part of the law that the covered entity must follow, and which includes on the technology side technical safeguards which govern like how the information is accessed, right? The access controls, audit controls defining like who is accessing the information, what information was accessed, whether it was modified or not, and ensuring integrity controls that protect the health information is not being tampered with, and so on. Right, so there should be a clear audit trail, ensure only legitimate people who have access to access it, avoiding impersonation and all of that. So in this case, what you're saying is you have a secure enclave, or like a secure environment where PHI could be stored and a compute could be performed on the PHI, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So in this case, say, for example, you're talking about the specialty pharmacy and the manufacturer example, right? Let's say if the manufacturer wants to know like how the drugs are performing in the market, right? And if they want to know like, okay, how many patients who have taken their drugs had any recent hospital admissions, or let's say if there's a hepatitis C drug, the manufacturer wants to know like, okay, how is the viral load looking after this medication was administered and so on. So correlation with the lab results. So the pharmacy could only be sharing aggregate information, right, which actually limits the level of detail a manufacturer want to know, right? So in this case, let's say the secure environment is on the pharmacy side, and the manufacturer can have a program that would do the compute on the pharmacy secure environment that could use the individually identifiable information, which is still with the pharmacy in an encrypted, protected way. And the manufacturer could just take out the results without the PHI. I believe that could be of great value to them, because now they'll be able to know like more details about patient John Doe without knowing who that particular patient is. They would be able to know like, okay, this patient took this medication, but then they had a recent admission or not had a recent admission, so on, without having to share PHI itself.
Yeah. So just to tease out a little more detail, the data set runs in the specialty pharmacies domain. The information is always encrypted, and it is only decrypted inside the secure enclave where it is processed by the manufacturer's application, so this could be referred to as bringing compute to where the data is. When the compute runs on this decrypted information, it is inside the secure enclave. So it is protected by using the hardware enforced protection technology, security technology. So there is no leak of information. A result is computed, and the result could be de-identified. So rather than de-identifying the input data set to the application, you de-identify the result and assure that there is no PHI in the result. And then that result could be shared back with the manufacturer, and that would be HIPAA compliant.
Correct. It would be.
And the working assumption here is that the result so obtained by the use of secure enclave technology would not only be HIPAA compliant, but the result would be, in some sense, afford better insights because it was operating on a complete data set rather than a de-identified data set.
Correct.
Okay. It is my belief that in certain rare diseases, etc., the data sets are not very large. So this may afford an additional benefit that the manufacturer would be able to get better insights because they are processing larger data sets.
Right. And if the environment, does an environment provide like a audit trail or an audit log in a tamper-proof way that could easily trace, okay, no unauthorized programs are being run on this secure environment?
Yeah, this secure enclave technology fundamentally provides a tamper-proof, completely verifiable audit log that records all the actions and actors that are operating inside the secure enclave. So every actor inside the secure enclave that accesses the data is a known and authorized entity. In fact, you can predetermine and specify and authorize only certain applications can access the data. So the manufacturer cannot submit any arbitrary application. They can only submit a pre-authorized application that has not been changed. And the the cryptographic image of that application is verified before access is granted inside the secure enclave to the data. So it is a known application, pre-authorized application. And it is recorded in this audit log, which is tamper-proof. So you have a verifiable, truthful log, and you can trust that because it is based on a hardware root of trust, which is what this secure enclave technology provides. So yes, there is a complete tamper-proof audit log available of all the actors and all the actions that happen. And this log will record which application ran against the data and whether the application was authorized or not authorized. In fact, if it was not authorized, it would not be permitted to run inside the secure enclave. I think that this would be a very interesting approach where the data sets could be processed and results obtained, which would improve patient outcomes and benefit the patients and provide extremely valuable information, and yet protect patient information by the use of this technology.
Right. I mean, it would be of great value if we can like tap into this information still without risking HIPAA violation. I think that would be a great approach and could tap the entire potential of the data that's being collected.
Do you know if how this data is stored and what sort of technologies specialty pharmacies use in the storage of this data? So, for example, is it cloud-hosted storage or in-prem storage or private cloud information? What sort of technologies are being used to store this valuable data?
I've seen a mix of these technologies, large specialty pharmacies that have a higher revenue. Most of them are holding on to their native platforms that are still on-premise, and the responsibility of ensuring data privacy and security falls upon their technology department or the IT team. And even startups, I've seen most of the startups use an on-prem environment primarily because the way these applications or the pharmacy dispensing softwares are traditionally built. On the other hand, some of the companies that offer MTM solutions as part of their package, the pharmacists kind of use a dispensing platform and then another cloud-based clinical platform where that information is captured and stored in the cloud. And when it's stored in the cloud, typically these companies create what they call like a virtual private cloud or a VPC environment to isolate PHI data from the rest of the data of the organization and govern the access points into that environment and ensuring endpoint protection and ensuring encryption of the information during rest and transit and access controls to that particular environment.
Now you use the terms you use the terms encryption at rest and encryption in transit. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what those terms mean.
Sure. So when it comes to ensuring the security of PHI, right? So think about a situation where, okay, you're communicating this PHI information over the internet, right? And any unauthorized user or a hacker could potentially intercept this communication to know about the information being shared, right? So in order to ensure the security of that, HIPAA law requires the entities that performing the data exchange, ensure the transmitted information is encrypted. And as of today, the minimum level of transportation layer security is TLS 1.2, which is what these entities should follow. But again, like the law doesn't say the minimum, right? The law just puts the onus on the covered entity and the business associates that actually perform this data exchange. And it's their responsibility to ensure the encryption is done in a foolproof, tamper-proof way. And when it comes to encryption at rest, it is to ensure, let's say you have a secure environment, right? But what if like a hacker gets in, right? And they're able to take control of the information you have. Even advanced systems have difficulty in ensuring it's hacker proof, right? So it's to make sure, like, even if a hacker got hold of your data, it's still unusable to the person because it would be encrypted, right? So it's to ensure only authorized users can view the information that's out there that's stored on a cloud or an on-prem environment.
The secure enclave technology brings another angle to this notion of encryption, which is that in secure enclaves, you can provide not only encryption at rest and in transit, but also when the data is being processed. Mm-hmm. And it would be an interesting use case to see if that could lead to other forms of getting better insights and better results from the processing of data through the use of encryption during use or during the processing stage of the data.
Interesting. So saying like the data itself is encrypted at all stages of its storing, processing, and transmission.
Yes. And this is made possible by the use of secure enclave technology.
So does secure enclave fit into a cloud as well as an on-prem environment?
Yes, it is generally available today on most of the public clouds, and of course, if you have an on-prem solution, then you could provision machines. If you have those machines that are manufactured by AMD, Intel, ARM, etc., then you could certainly use secure enclave technology to provide this kind of encryption in use technology to your data sets. Well, thank you so much, Vasant, for chatting with us on Data Privacy Day. I wish you safe travels and look forward to speaking with you the next time that you happen to have a chance to and the time to meet with us.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me here. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.